Welcome, everyone. My name is Boris Mann. You can find me on the blue skies at bman.ca. I am an independent protocol fan, and I'm running the app protocol.dev account. We typically do these tech talks on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, and publish them on the website. It's a ghost website, and we'll share the recording afterwards. You can subscribe on there if you want to get email notifications, or follow us on Smoke Signal. So if you go to the calendar tab, everything gets entered in there. Up next, so next Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a slightly new thing. I'm calling it a dev discussion. We're going to talk about rich post interaction and something called open frames. Um, should be a slightly smaller group if you want to really dig into the technical details of a few things. Don't have a date yet, but late November, early December. The Wakewind developer we're looking to book some time along with Chad, who's bilingual in Japanese and English, is going to help me out with that. And that'll probably be it for this year. Maybe a social hangout in December at some point where we just like share projects and screen share and stuff like that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to today's talk with Trezy. Welcome. You are muted now.
There we go. I fixed it. This is why you should always use software mute when it's an option, because then the screen will tell you rather than having to remember to look for the red button. All right, let's see. Where is my share? That's fun. Does Zoom have like a companion mode similar to Meet, where I can share my screen from a different device? Let's find out. All right. See, I thought I had it all figured out and set up. And here we are. Okay. While I try to get my slides going here, I can do some basic introductions, I guess. So my name is Trezy. I've been a programmer for 25 or so years, software engineer. It's been the focus of most of my career. I am mostly here to talk about the games industry labeler, but part of that I sort of wanted to talk about my efforts of building the entire game dev community on Blue Sky here. So let's see. Okay, here I'm gonna do it real dirty, and we're actually gonna do my screen share through my camera because that is the best that I've got. All right. And because y'all need to know exactly what my most recently used emojis are, that's going to be up there. There we go. Okay. Blue Sky Game Dev. So, again, who am I? My name's Trezy. In former lives, I've been a professional touring drummer. I've been a filmmaker and a stuntman. I started my career actually as a graphic designer. I've done live streaming, but today I am a software engineer. You can find me on Blue Sky at Trezy Codes, Trezy.codes. You can find me on GitHub at Trezy, and then I have my website at Trezy.codes. Um, like I said earlier, I've been a programmer for 25 years. I've worked in a ton of different programming languages. I'm not that multilingual. They're programming languages. Um, But just across my career, I've consulted with companies of all different sizes, from Fortune 500s and Fortune 50s, all the way down to brand new startups, and consulting with individuals. So I've worked on bank software, and I've built mobile apps, and I've built websites and APIs, and database infrastructure and DevOps. I've just sort of been across the whole spectrum of programming and development. But over the past 6, 7 years, I got really into game dev, and that's sort of been my passion as a programmer. So when I joined Blue Sky, um, I uh, I did some searching, and I looked for a couple or I looked for folks that had, game dev in their name or in their bio or anything. And I really only found a couple of people who were also in this community. So it was really, really small. I think I was in the 30,000s for joining the platform, and there just wasn't a cluster for game dev yet, and there wasn't anybody really trying to put that community together. But on the other site, we always had this huge blooming community of game devs sharing their progress, talking about their games, showing off the things that they're building. And so I really wanted to have that back here on Blue Sky. So that's sort of how it started. The first thing that I did to really build up that community was I put together the orientation packet. The game dev, Blue Sky game dev orientation packet is what I've always called it. I'm on version 4 at this point, because I update it every so often as the platform adds new features and things change and such. For example, I think V3 came about because Blue Sky added video, and that was a huge GIFs and video, and that was a huge advancement specifically for the game dev community, because it's really hard to show off the progress of your game without being able to show the animations. Oh, hey, I've made it so that when you attack a monster, it actually shows hit frames and death animations and stuff, and it's really hard to show off without some sort of um, moving picture media, right? So the orientation packet has always been something that I write up, and it's a guide to, like, hey, you're new here. This is a new platform. Things are different from what you're used to on Twitter. And so we're going to walk you through how they're different and how you can really get into this specific community, and then how you can use this platform effectively to communicate with that community and to engage with them. And so I covered things like the fact that they're called skeets, right? That's important. Everybody needs to know that. And also that there are a couple of specific threads that had gotten a lot of traction, one from me, one from Rami Ishmael, who's also very prolific in the game dev community, where people were posting their intros. So, hey, make sure you go there. And this is going to become a really good repository for game devs to find other game devs on the platform, because we didn't have lists yet. We didn't have starter packs. We weren't even close to being able to collate large chunks of people to make it really easy to find them. So these intro skeets were a really great way to do it. I walked people through custom feeds after custom feeds got added. Um, there's a handful of different pieces that I covered. Intro skeets, yep. There are a handful of different pieces that I covered in these intro packets. Like I said, we're on V4 at this point. There's information that I've pulled off, like, hey, you're a game dev, you're on this platform. We can't post GIFs or videos yet. That's not the case. So that's come out of there. But I've also, once custom feeds were added, I added a section about, hey, how do you get into the feeds? What are the feeds? Here's a living list of feeds so that we can keep track of all the ones that are relative to the game dev community. So that was sort of my first attempt to bring the game dev community together, and it was pretty effective. Lots of people were rallying around it and making sure to reshare it and repost it, and keep sharing it across other groups. Oh yeah, yes, that's absolutely right. The first iteration we had was lists, or was moderation lists before we had user lists, and so the only way to get a group of people into a list was to put them into a mute list, and of course, people accidentally muted them all the time. But of course, that's not the case anymore. But so the next thing that I did building this community was when feeds dropped. I was one of the early feed devs. I put together the game dev feeds to cover a handful of different topics. So there's the main game dev feed, there's the game news feed, which specifically covers, it includes stuff from a couple of hashtags, and then it specifically includes a handful of publications that are already on the platform. We've got Screenshot Saturday and
Tre-
Wishlist Wednesday.
Trezy,
Oh, yeah.
Tre-
Yeah.
so just so you know, and I'm realizing you're probably not seeing this, is it looks like you put a pixelated filter, so we can't actually read anything other than a pixelated version of game dev feeds.
That's like on Zoom?
Yes.
Oh, it's because the camera feed. Oof. Yeah, because I see it fine on Zoom, so I don't know what's wrong with all of you. It works on my machine, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's a 4K broadcast. Uh let's see. Are there any questions that I've uh missed that I can dive into while I try to fix this?
No, it's I
Okay.
think it's great hearing about the story about onboarding a community, because of course it's the chicken and egg of like who are the people there and so on.
Yep.
I share a co-working space with a bunch of people who are indie game devs, and we host like playtest nights and so on. And I
Hmm.
just excitedly started sharing like relevant Blue Sky links with them, and then that got them to go like, oh, I guess my people are there. Um,
Sure.
but definitely some people are also like, what is this? I barely use Twitter properly.
Uh-huh.
Grumble, grumble, grumble. But like it's happening for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing that you could do is you could email me this deck and I could share it for you.
Yeah, I think I've got it here.
Okay.
Let's see. Maybe. Full screen projector.
Yeah, Krista, it's a great question. I think there's a bunch of things like that that we want to get to.
There we go. Okay. So we've got, and now my mouse on my desktop is going to disappear. Okay. There we go. Now it should be good. Is the screen share working and looking not so pixelated, hopefully?
Wow.
Is that better? All right.
Woohoo.
See, like I said, I used to be a live streamer. I should really have this stuff unlocked, but it's been so long since I've had to do this through Zoom. Like I'm so used to it on Discord, and they've added all these nice screen sharing things. Anyways, all right. So let's see, where were we? We were at the feeds. Okay, yeah. So Screenshot Saturday and Wishlist Wednesday feeds. Those are pretty common hashtags on Twitter. We would have some days where like somebody was picked to host this feed or this thread, and everybody would post their Screenshot Saturday posts there and show off, hey, this is sort of the progress that I've got on my game and such. And then game jobs and careers, of course. If you're not familiar, the industry has been hurting a lot for game devs over the past couple of years, and so this felt like a just an opportunity to try and connect some devs and some studios, and hopefully rebuild some careers a little bit. And so the feeds were sort of the next step, and I got pretty deep into feed development. At one point on my fly.io setup, I think I had like 8 different applications that controlled the entire feed. I had I think I called it the sieve, which was the application that just grabbed or no, it was the ingestion system that would grab the stuff from the fire hose and send it to a RabbitMQ application. And then I had the sieve, which would pull stuff from the RabbitMQ application, process it, push it into the database. And then, of course, I had the API that Blue Sky would hit to grab the information from the database. And there were way too many servers, and it was way more complex than it needed to be. And it fell over on the regular because it's way more complex than necessary. So at this point, honestly, I host all of my feeds on Skyfeed. I ended up moving everything over there. Um, I am uh, I have intentions, I should say. We're all programmers. We know what intentions look like, but I have intentions of moving the feeds back to my own custom infrastructure, especially now that we have access to Jetstream, which is this like filtered JSON version of the fire hose. Um, that's way more efficient. Uh, I haven't quite gotten there yet, but that's sort of the next big thing that I'm going to be working on with the game dev community stuff on Blue Sky. So I built the feeds, and finally, after the feeds, the big thing that has really taken off has been the games industry labeler. Labelers are relatively new. If you're not familiar with them, they're originally intended as a moderation tool on Blue Sky, so you can submit uh, excuse me, you can report items, you can report posts, accounts, profiles, lists, all this stuff. You can report it to labelers. You can select which labelers you want to report it to, and then the labelers can go through and review that content and then place labels on it for things like this is inappropriate, this is hate speech, this is sexual content, whatever. There's all sorts of different things they can do. They can apply custom labels, and then you as the user can go to the labeler and subscribe to it, and then set how those labels impact your feeds. So saying I want I want hate speech to be hidden, like don't let it show up at all. Sexual content, I want that to be on my feed, but I want it to be blurred. And or I just want AI posts to be labeled. I just want to see a badge on it to know that it's AI. Um, but I, I can't remember her name, but the one that built the pronouns labeler is sort of the inspiration, I think, for most of us that are doing what has been deemed positive labeling. So we have built these positive labelers that are not intended for moderation, similar to the way that we started with moderation mute lists, and then we ended up getting user lists where people weren't supposed to mute them. The positive labelers are intended to provide information or help gather communities, or just be like an outward um, expression of something about yourself, without being used for hiding content, blurring content, whatever. And so the games industry labeler specifically is about labeling people in the games industry. So we label game devs, we label archivists, we label people on the business side. We also have a bunch of verified labels, like publisher and journalists and publication, that I manually verify. And so when I first launched the labeler, it was fully manual. I thought, I don't know how many people are going to be into this, so I'm going to put it up and we'll just sort of see, right? Do things that don't scale first.
You
So
you 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 didn't start by writing a bunch of custom code? Bold.
I didn't. I know. It's so weird. No, so Blue Sky has their own software called Ozone, which is used for the official labeling system. So the Blue Sky moderation system uses Ozone to label inappropriate content, sexual content, porn, things like that. Um, that software is open source and it's just a web application. So I've got my own instance running. That was what I did. I just followed the hosting document in the Ozone repo and stood up my own version of it. And I said, hey, here's this thing. I've put a bunch of labels in it. If you want one, just ping me and I'll add it to you. Um, and so uh, I got a huge influx of people that wanted those labels. I think for 2 or 3 days during the Brazilian wave, when Twitter was banned in Brazil, and we had this massive influx of users to Blue Sky from Brazil. I For 2 or 3 days, I was labeling between 300 and 500 accounts a day, which was almost a full-time job for those few days. It was a lot of work. And so when that happened, I thought, well, I guess people do like this, and we probably should we should probably put some automation around this. And I can't keep up. This is too much. It was actually after the Brazilian wave. It wasn't too bad. Things died down, and then I think with the next huge wave that still hasn't died down of the removal of real blocks and the updating of the terms of service on Twitter for AI scraping. that big wave, I couldn't keep up with. There were too many requests, and I said, "Hey, everybody, I can't do it. I'm gonna write a thing to fix this. Chill, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." So 2 or 3 days later, I posted, "Hey, I've got this done," and so I built a chatbot for getting labels uh, from the games industry labeler. And the idea was that so the pronouns labeler and a lot of the automated labelers right now, they have a handful of posts on the labelers, and you can go and you can heart, favorite, like whatever the posts, and you'll get the labels associated with those posts, and that's great. I could have done that. The reason I didn't is because of those verified labels. So when people requested a game dev label, I give that to everyone. If you claim to be a game dev, I think you should have game dev label. There's too much imposter syndrome. The heck with that. Everybody should have a game dev label. Um, but then games journalists, games publications, games publishers, games studios, I wanted to make sure that my labeler wasn't supporting any impersonation, that I wasn't, putting labels on people that weren't actually who they said they were. And so those were verified. I required some sort of proof. We would DM back and forth, and once I was satisfied, I would give them the appropriate label. And so uh, to automate that with posts was too much effort. I couldn't figure out a good way, a good flow for users to get those verified labels, to send me information to verify them, and then to finish the process and actually give them the labels. And so instead, I built a chatbot. Fortunately, uh, it wasn't long before that big wave that I really couldn't handle that Blue Sky had added chat, that had added DMs, and so the APIs were available for that, made it relatively easy to build a chatbot for this process and handle everything. And also, yeah, just-in-time features. Like, it is mind-boggling to think that I've been on this platform for just over a year, a little more than a year, and like today it's basically 2014 Twitter. But when I started, it was like, I don't even know, man. It was like my side project, like Twitter replacement. It was like the test app that I built. I was like, oh yeah, here, I'll build a Twitter clone. And it was garbage, right? That was sort of where it started. And today it's like a fully featured application. Everything just keeps coming. It's really great. Yeah, so P Singletary says, can you give me give examples of data you verified? And I actually will. I'll walk us through the whole process here in just a minute. So, um, yeah. Okay. So labels, verified labels. Let's see what else. Yeah, the different pieces of the games industry labeler. Like I said, Ozone. I'm still using Ozone actually. So I have the automated chatbot that you reach out to if you're getting non-verified labels. Then I just give them to you. If you're getting verified labels, then the chatbot takes in the information to verify, and then actually creates a moderation report in Ozone for me to go through and review, because going through those chats is a nightmare, which I'll show here in just a minute. But but yeah, it's a lot, especially when you've got tons of people sending DMs to get non-verified labels, trying to find the ones. Yeah. So we create moderation reports, and I use that to go through and review and actually give people the verified labels. And then lists. I actually just recently added lists. So when you get user lists, not moderation lists. So when you get a label, you are automatically added to one of the lists that the labeler has. So now it's really easy, because one of the things that people really like about having the games industry labeler in the game dev industry is that it makes it really easy to find the other people in the community that you're trying to connect with, especially if you're not like in the game dev feed, right? The game dev feed, most people there are game devs, not everybody, but the vast majority. But outside of that, if you're looking at mutuals or you're looking at Discover or following or any of those feeds, it's harder to suss out, like, okay, this person is posting their pics from their trip to Paris. I don't know what my connection is to them, but having the game dev labels on them makes it really easy to find people that you have that commonality with. So it's been a really great thing. But there's no way to like go find everybody that has a game dev label or everybody that has a games journalist label. So I created the lists, and this was actually just a brand new thing. I just did it last week, actually, while I was at KubeCon, and got it set up. So once you get a label, you automatically get added to the list. I also have a script that I'm trying to get working to backfill all the people from before I added the feature. We'll get there. Um, so that's sort of the stack for the games industry labeler. The chatbot is just a JavaScript application. It's uh, uh, pretty simple. I do have it on GitHub, but it's real basic. I mean, it's a bunch of if-else statements that are like, did they send this message? Okay, cool, do this thing, and it's very, very basic. But thus far, we've labeled over 4,000 game devs and over 230 studios. Um, so that's hang on. It doesn't look like my screen share is updating. That's cool. Oh, there we go. Okay. Um, of course, now I have to go back and do. That's fun. Love it when everything crashes. Sure. Okay. There we go. All right. Yeah. So 4,000, more than 4,000 game devs, more than 230 studios. This was as of about 10 o'clock last night. I also have a automated post that goes out at 10 o'clock Central every evening saying how many labels total we've applied and how many new for each label that day. So 5,700 total labels applied so far. The labeler's been running for just under 3 months now. Um, these are all of the labels that we have, the non-verified ones. We have dev, archivist, business, educator, media organizer, and research. These are all labels that were requested early on. So the first thing I had was just game dev and game studio, and then a bunch of people said, "Hey, what about this one? What about that one?" And I tried to make sure that I kept the numbers small. So if we could lump you into another into another label, we would. But otherwise, there were a handful that just didn't match anything else. So I sort of separated them out. And then the verified labels, of course, like I said, these are the ones that I don't want people to be able to impersonate other ones or other people because I didn't do my due diligence when applying the label. So these are the ones that are making sure that these people are who they say they are. Um, yeah, okay. So let me run through a um a quick example of using the chat bot from both sides. So I'll open chat, new chat. Okay. Here's actually one of the things on my wish list is for most people, if you wanted to start a DM, you could go up here and click the little DM button uh, next to the follow button. But labelers don't have that. It's been removed. And it makes me grumpy, and I've told everyone. And so hopefully we'll fix it eventually. But instead, you can go to chat, you can start a new chat. Okay, great. So we'll start a chat with Ozone. There's a lot. I've done this a lot. Um, so the first thing here, actually, you know what? We'll just delete this chat and we'll start fresh if the relay is okay with it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm just going to say hello. We'll give it a minute and hopefully the chatbot will respond. It also might not. Oh, there we go. Okay. So it's just some basic conversational chatbot stuff. I'm not using natural language processing or anything. I'm literally looking for specific strings. So send the word start and then we'll kick off the process. So I'm going to send start. The chatbot will respond with like, here are your options, basically, right? So first off, we're going to group you into one of the larger categories. So some of the options don't apply to organizations, some of them don't apply to individuals, most of them don't apply to games. So we're going to say we're an individual here. And this is one of the things that I want to fix the most is that these are not like straight numerical order. So we go from 7 to 11 here because these are kind of IDs. I'm using them as IDs in the code. And so we essentially just are like, hey, this one doesn't fit individual, so pull it out, but I don't update the numbering. I gotta fix that. It's stupid. But anyways, so it gives you a list of which labels are valid for you, right? You're an individual, so you can be a game dev, archivist, journalist, whatever. So let's do both a game dev and a journalist, right? Uh, I'm going to start that. So game dev is a non-verified label, but journalist is a verified label. So the first thing that the bot will do is check what numbers did you send? Okay, let's see which labels did you select? You selected game dev and you selected game journalist. So first off, I'm going to apply the game dev. It's non-verified, right? That gets done. No problem. We're successful. Um, this did technically happen, but I already had the game dev label, so it doesn't really matter. But if you ever want to remove one, you can do the appeals process. I also need to update this to add appeals and label removal directly to the bot so that I don't have to do that. But I might also be able to show off how appeals work in the labeler in the Ozone software here in just a minute. So then some of your labels require verification. This is sort of the thing that somebody was asking about earlier. P. Singletary was asking about earlier is what does verification look like for us? And so this is the specific response that we send to most people. This line right here gets added if you selected journalist. Otherwise, it's the same message for every verified label. So you can update your Blue Sky handle to match your website. That is the best thing, right? I'm trying to encourage everybody to use domains as handles because it is the single most uh, like verifiable uh, tool that they have to say, I really am the person that I say that I am. That doesn't work, that's fine. Go to your website, add a Blue Sky link. There are plenty of people who are social media managers that in the game dev industry, they don't necessarily have access to like go and change DNS records and get things working. So if they can add a link to their website or post something from their Twitter that I can go verify or from their LinkedIn, then I go and verify that. So the next step is once you've done that, give us a link. So right here, I'll say let's see. My name is my handle. Wait, that's not right. Domain name is my handle. And then I'll also say, because not everybody realizes that these are options and you only have to do one, even though I say it. Sometimes they'll do multiples. So I'll say, also here's my post on x.com/ whatever, foobar. And then I posted something to my LinkedIn as well. Okay, now I'm just gonna verify and the bottle. Take a look real quick and then it'll respond. If you haven't sent anything and you just say verify, it'll be like, hey, we can't do that. I actually need some information from you. So once you've sent some information, it'll say, great, let's move on with our lives and do the thing. Okay, so now the bot has created a moderation report. So we can take a look at Ozone. So this is the Ozone software. This is my current moderation queue. These are the moderation reports that have been created through the chatbot this morning that I have not processed yet. We also have escalated ones. We used to use these because I had a couple of helpers early on who would also go through the list and any non-verified labels, they would just process those. And then the verified ones we would escalate. Now all of the escalated ones are either people who are appealing to remove a label or people who are actually the unresolved reports sometimes we'll get those reports that are like, hey, this is hate speech. I'm like, that sucks. That's not what I do though. So we've got these reports, so let's take a look at mine. You can see again, I've tested this a lot, so there's a lot of events in here, but this is generally what gets sent through, right? I compile a tiny little string because these fields don't actually support new lines, which makes it hard to read. So I compile a little string. What labels is this? What verified labels is this person looking for? And then what verification information did they send? Usually they'll send like actual links and stuff. So I'll go through these. I'll check if their handle is their domain name, then I usually just send it right on through unless there's a little, my username is Bob the builder and my domain name is Dora the Explorer, I'm like, well, hang on, those don't match up, right? So I'll do some due diligence if things don't match up. But for the most part, a lot of it's pretty easy. So I'm in this case, domain name is the handle. It's real easy. I verified the information that got sent along. I'll hit label. I'll say, okay, you're a games journalist now. I hit submit, and I'm done. The whole process is done. The user has the labels that they want. Everything is set. Sometimes I'll get verified reports that come through. They're like, hey, um, uh, I can't put things on my website, or it'll be like, here's a link to my Twitter profile that has literally no information linking it back to my Blue Sky or anything. And then I'll have to DM them. Anybody that follows me that happens to be here has probably seen a lot of the skeets that go out being like, hey, please DM me so I could talk to you about your labeling request. That's usually I didn't get enough information, or they requested a label that I think it was not the one that they wanted or something like that. Um, but I mean, that's the process of labeling for the games industry labeler. It's literally just go through the chat bot, things get submitted, and then I go through this list usually a couple of times a day just to keep it short and manageable, and make sure that everybody has the labels that they want, and then I move on. Yeah, okay, so
There's a
presentation.
question in the chat
Oh yeah.
is protocol wise, where do labels live?
Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. And it's a weird question because they live in a couple of places. So as a labeler, you need to maintain your own record of the labels, right? So you have to have an endpoint that that a PDS can hit and say, "Hey, which labels are valid?" Because your account. So sorry, I guess the process of creating a labeler, right? One of the first things that you have to do is create the account for the labeler, and then you have to announce to the network that that account is a labeler. That's how the profile gets changed on Blue Sky, is that we've announced it, and so they know it's a labeler, so they're going to show it appropriately. And so then when somebody loads up their feed, uh, all of the labelers that they are subscribed to get a request from the PDS saying, hey, what labels do you have? So let's make sure that we're synced up. So your database is the main source, right? But the PDS is also caching that label information. So you have uh, when Blue Sky is doing their feed compilation, right? They're using the cached label information, not the stuff directly from the labeler. And that's also why if you want to remove a label, you actually have to send a new record negating the previous record, saying, actually, this isn't a valid label anymore. We're going to negate it. We're going to remove it. The person doesn't want it. Um, so so your labeler is the source of truth, but PDSs keep their own cache of what labels are going on. The reason for that is because first off, there's multiple PDSs, right? We have to be able to handle a decentralized distributed network here, um, and so your label has to be the source of truth. But when a PDS renders a feed, a timeline, an account, anything like that, they're actually going to that cache for every labeler that a user in the app view is subscribed to, right? So if I'm subscribed to the pronouns labeler, if I'm subscribed to the games industry labeler, if I'm subscribed to whatever third labeler, and then I'm by default subscribed to the Blue Sky moderation service, right? So the PDS has to hit every one of those labelers to find all of the information. So you emit your record saying that we've applied a label or we've negated a label. The PDS caches that and then uses that cache to render things in the app view. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I was just looking. I dropped links to the app proto browser, and the chat log is saved
Mm,
too, so we'll have that afterwards.
yeah.
So technically, the values are stored in the PDS of the labeler account, plus all the caching that you just arranged. And the
Yes.
PDS might be a Blue Sky PDS, or it might be self-hosted.
Right.
as the optionality, and essentially the other PDSs do caching,
Hmm.
um, because the relayer, I know I'm spitting back what you're saying, because the
No, you're
relayer
good.
takes out helps spread all of the labels once it's announced.
Right. Right. And there's some weirdness around the way that labels and chat actually work right now, because you have to make all of those requests through a relay, but the labeler doesn't necessarily like, it's not authorized with the relay, right? It's not uh I mean, it is actually. That's a lie. It is authorized with the relay. But there's uh I've completely lost the thread of what I was saying. All right. So you have to use the relay as a proxy when you're making
Right.
requests to the labeler, right? And the same with chat, because they don't live directly in the normal PDS or app view or anything that you're using for um, Blue Sky or whatever your app view is.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah. Okay. All right. So I have a wish list for labeler stuff. There's a handful of things that I really, really would love to see. Um, like I said, there's a handful. Actually, most of the labelers out there are actually positive labelers. The majority of labelers that exist today are positive labelers, not moderation labelers, which is interesting in its own right. Um, but the support for positive labelers really isn't there. So if I'm on the right computer here. But if I look at uh, the oh boy, there we go. If I look at the games industry labeler right here, so I have all of these labels. Uh, One of the most confusing things for a lot of people that are new to Blue Sky is that they say, okay, I've heard that I can get a label, so I'm going to go to the labeler account that people have told me to go to. Okay, well, I'll subscribe, sure. Okay, now I see this list of options down here. Well, you know what? I don't want the game dev label, so I'm going to turn that off. I don't want the archivist label, so I'm going to turn that off. Except that's not what these options do. uh, what they do is hide says anything with this label. If it is a post, then it'll be the post. If it is the account or the profile, it'll be every piece of content from that account or profile will be hidden. It will not show up in any of my feeds, right? That's not awesome for a positive labeler. I don't want that to happen. So I have to guide a lot of people who are like, hey, I went and got my game dev label, but all of a sudden I can't see anything from game devs. Okay, let me explain this to you. Show badge just shows the badge on content. So if I look at my profile, you'll see I have the game dev label right here. I have the Pixie.js and custom in-house engine labels from the game engine labeler, and I have the he/him pronouns from the pronoun labeler, right? And so those are where they show up. But if I was to go in here and turn it off, then all of a sudden it vanishes from all of my posts, right? That doesn't mean other people can't see it. It just means that I can't see it. So I'm gonna turn that back to show badge. But if I set it to hide, I'm actually not sure what it'll do on my own page. Probably nothing. Okay, yeah, nothing. Thank goodness. But if I turn it to hide and I go to like the game dev feed, then everybody that has a game dev badge will no longer show up in the feed, because the labels are all applied at an account level or at a profile level, not at sorry, it is an account level, not at a post level. So, better support for positive labelers would look like being able to change the way that this works, being able to say that, hide and off actually aren't, or hide isn't an option, right? Really simple is just removing that. And that's actually in the JSON that you set up for how my labelers look and how they're supposed to be presented on Blue Sky, but we can't specifically remove the hide option. Um, so that is the top thing on my wish list, is changing that, but just generally better support for positive labelers. So being able to say, like declare on the page, this is a positive labeler. It is not meant for moderation. It is meant for just showing off that this content is this type of content. Restoring the DM button would make my life so much better. Like I said, I've already been grumpy about it. I've been grumpy about it at people and to people. So I won't dive too deep into it, but that's sort of uh, this is a really big thing. I get a lot of messages from people being like, "Hey, I read your entire thread about how to get a label, but I don't understand this." I'm like, "Yeah, well, go back and read the second post, which says this is how you do it. You have to go into your DMs. You have to click the new chat button, and then you have to type the labeler's name. It's not confusing at all, I swear." And label display option customization. That's sort of what I was talking about with being able to say, like, you can't actually hide this label. That's not what it's intended for. If you want to turn it off so you can't see it, that's fine, but it's not for hiding content. Let's see. Okay, so that's pretty much it for my presentation. I don't know. I've probably gone way over time,
No,
haven't I?
that's amazing.
No?
Thank
Okay,
you so much,
great.
Trezy. That's awesome. Thank you. Do you want to go turn off sharing and
I
go
sure
into
do.
chat mode? Amazing.
Yeah,
All right, here we are. That was great. That was awesome. First time,
thanks.
like I can hear the pain of what you're doing this, and I can see the numbers that you've labeled and
Yeah.
put this stuff together. But I think, look, my question to you is like, how is the games industry reacting? How do you feel about
Yeah.
the games industry on a Blue Sky and App Protocol?
Yeah, so the game dev industry on Blue Sky has been moving over en masse since the Brazilian wave started, and then the more recent wave. Like, we've seen a huge impact. The game dev industry is a creative industry. We post a lot of content, we post a lot of screenshots, we post a lot of videos, and the change to terms of service over there to allow AI scraping was a pretty detrimental hit to especially indie developers over there that are trying to show off their stuff. So that was a pretty big kick in the pants for folks to move over to Blue Sky, and they've really done it. Like, it's thriving community on Blue Sky at this point, and the same community on Twitter is pretty barren. It's a very specific crowd of people that's left over there. I'm sure everybody knows what I mean. Um, so the game dev industry has been reacting really positively to the labelers specifically. I've gotten nothing but positive comments. I get encouraging posts every day being like, "Hey, thanks so much for putting this together." I'm like, "Oh, that's great, thank you." There was a post actually on Game Developer just a few days ago, gamedeveloper.com.biz, wherever it is, gamedeveloper.com and gamesindustry.biz. I was on Game Developer about game dev on Blue Sky, and how the community really is making that shift to Blue Sky and away from Twitter. They mentioned the feeds, they mentioned the labeler, sort of driving even more traffic over. So on average, since I launched the labeler, we've had around 56 new game devs labeled per day. Since that post, I think we're at an average of like 70 some odd. So, like, it's not a huge bump, but it's significant. Um, so it's been a really positive reaction. I think, sort of something that most of us working on AT Proto stuff see is that um, a lot of the distributed, decentralized functionality features and such of Blue Sky, it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to non-tech users yet. I think handles are such a great feature. They're so powerful, to be able to set your domain name and say, "I absolutely own this." It's not something that I have to buy from some user for $300 because they picked it up back in 2010, and I really want it. It's there's no market for that. It's just, here, I'm going to go buy my domain from a registrar, and I'm going to put it on as my handle, and that's also my website, and it's such a powerful declaration of identity. So that's really great.
Uh,
The
Ezra has a question that I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
As Ezra, do you want to go ahead and ask your question live?
I can, yeah. It was mostly surrounding how much work you had to do to get the chatbot set up inside Ozone, because I'm wondering if it would make sense for Blue Sky to change Ozone to incorporate the idea of a chatbot, um, or at least the ability to, whenever you get DMs to directly to the labeler, that it would show up in Ozone. Is that the way it currently works, or is that something you had to implement?
So it's something that I had to implement. There's no chat functionality built into Ozone to begin with. It's all through the moderation and the reporting system. Um, uh, but the chatbot runs as a completely separate application right now. It's not integrated with Ozone at all, actually. But because of the way that records get persisted across the network and such, when I create a label from the chatbot, it just automatically works in Ozone, which is so cool. And I did not expect to be the case. I expected I was going to have to do a lot more extra work to like specifically jam stuff into the database in Ozone and make it work right. But I didn't. I wrote the chatbot, I emitted some labels, and I cringed and gritted my teeth. And then I checked Ozone. I was like, oh, hey, it worked. That was easy. Um, yeah. So I don't know if integrating a chatbot into Ozone really makes sense because Ozone is not intended for what we're using it for, right? I think I think what would be like the best sort of string of changes to see would be if we got the better support for positive labelers first, right? So making sure that the labelers can say, "Hey, I'm a positive labeler," and disable some of those moderation features, and then maybe seeing some changes to Ozone or a separate application, probably a separate application, because I don't know if Blue Sky themselves have use for positive labeling, right? I don't see what that use case would be. So a third party builds a separate application, maybe forked from Ozone, to say this is uh, the chatbot integrated version, right? That does not handle any moderation stuff. Because another thing with Ozone is that we've got built in, like hard coded, a bunch of labels that I never want to apply and sometimes do on
Yeah.
accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can label things as porn. I can label things as um what's you I can label things to say you can't see them if you're not logged in. Like first off, that is way more power than I want. Second, it's not appropriate. One of the things that one of the labels that I have access to in Ozone that I would really love to get rid of is graphic media. So when you label an account as graphic media, then it'll automatically blur their profile picture and any pictures that they post. And the biggest challenge for me is that I also have a label called games media. And the number of times that I've accidentally labeled people as graphic media is way too high. So I would love to be able to turn that off. It's just not a setting that I can get into in Ozone right
And
now, right?
and technically, it's because you're inheriting a bunch of other things that initially was just Blue Sky applying things,
Exactly.
and people still need to be subscribed to your labeler for those actions to take effect.
Yes.
So it's not like you're reaching in and doing that for everyone on the site. For the
Hmm.
record, uh, yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So Sebastian is saying as well, basically the same suggestion, probably a fork. Yeah, I mean something to
Yeah.
remember is Ozone is effectively the very quick hack that the Blue Sky team put together that they needed to supply to their own moderation team.
Yep.
They may have some other things right now because literally they don't have time to like update the like open source version. I don't know. So it's like open source as a courtesy so that other people don't have to
Hmm.
start from scratch. But clearly, positive labeling and moderation services generally probably need some revamping in the future. And
Yep.
something for all of us to remember, platform thinking is, oh, that team over there will do everything for us. Protocol thinking is like, yeah, PR's welcome slash forks or other things, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I have a hi again. I have a thank you so much for the presentation and all the work you've been doing. I have a question that I think sort of fits in right here, which is why I jumped in. I was on last week and saw Rudy talk, seeing you talk on um, on the Blue Sky app, I've been watching everybody talk about the ways that the community has jumped in to do a lot of this work, and it's amazing and inspiring. A theme that I'm picking up is that a lot of it is sort of stacks of hacks, which is awesome. Like watching you go through your process was really awesome. In all these little moments where you clearly ran into like, oh, this wasn't built for this, but I'm just going to make it work anyway, and not try to go like fork this and make it work for like everything. Just make it work for me so that I can provide this service that I'm trying to provide. And I saw Rudy definitely had other different versions of that same idea going on. I wonder, so I guess the question that I have with that preface is, I noticed that the people that are running big successful services here have been around for a minute, have been kind of working through change and growth in a really cool way. Now that we're at a point, it feels like we're at a point of sort of an inflection point of user growth on the platform that feels a little bit like this process of being able to sort of like indie hack your way to standing up a new service. Like, for example, if I wanted to just to keep it close to what we're talking about today, like if I wanted to take your ideas and stand up a dev industry in total version of what you're doing, it feels like the raw numbers now would make it pretty difficult, maybe I'll just call it intimidating, to engage with, because rather than starting at a situation where I might have 10 to 20 moderation events a day and then building it up over time, and it feels like you would maybe potentially start with like a pretty strong fire hose. And I'll leave it at that because that was a really long-winded thing. But like, what maybe you, Trezy, and also like, I don't know, I know Nick's on. If anybody wanted to speak to kind of how that is looking from your side.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Cool.
So I think you're right. I think one of the things for me, one of the things you mentioned is we've been sort of hacks on hacks, stacks of hacks on hacks, and we've been working through as Blue Sky sort of changes and grows from the beginning. I think the thing that drew me as a developer so deeply into Blue Sky stuff and AT Proto stuff is that like the Blue Sky team, which is, unarguably the team supporting AT Proto right now, right? I think the Blue Sky team recognized from the very beginning that the third-party developer community of Twitter was one of the strongest aspects of Twitter, right? And so they embraced that from the very beginning. And so that's made it really easy to be engaged in that community. And then watching the way that the Blue Sky team builds features and iterates on features has, I think, set a precedent for the way that we as third-party developers also build and iterate on features for the platform. And so seeing that, they put out mod lists, or mute lists. They weren't entirely sure how well mute lists were going to work, what exactly they were going to be used for, other than muting people. They got used for all sort of other stuff. And so the Blue Sky team took that into consideration and said, okay, we need to figure out how to support these other use cases that are being engaged. And so they created user lists, they changed mute lists to moderation lists, and these things took on a new life. And it was specifically because of the efforts of the third-party developers, right? And so I think we will see similar roadmaps for just about everything that we have on Blue Sky, right? I think labeling is still very early. Moderation had to happen from the very early days of the platform, but moderation in its current form is like the fourth evolution of what their internal moderation system looked like, right? And so things are continuing to change and evolve. And I think having access to Ozone today, Ozone actually the open source thing does get updates the default like Docker Compose file, which I am still using, has everything built in, so it automatically updates as soon as they push change, or nightly whenever they push changes. So it's staying up to date, and we're getting all those features, and that's really great. I think the support for
which to be clear, like I didn't know if that was the case. Like that alone,
yeah.
So you
that's
have a team
incredible.
that is a side effect of their own tools.
Yep.
Is auto updating it for you.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. So that's a big part of where how I think about the development and iteration in third party stuff there. And I think the other question, sorry, Sebastian, you had another question, but Boris looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, I'll let you talk about it. I think I wanted to go on to Sebastian talking about the like, oh, it's intimidating and it's big.
Yeah.
I'm going to be super direct here. The default experience for any dev building anything will be that no one will care and you will get zero adoption. Okay? So Labeler X, I think, is very interesting, but you need to think about kind of niche communities in different ways. I'm part of a co-op called Subvert that's just got started that is aiming to build a replacement for Bandcamp. And I have been advocating to use @Proto and thinking, oh, wait, actually, we can do something much more quickly, which as part of co-op member onboarding, we can verify people. And for now, like we should get to something automated, but for now, I think we can just use Ozone. And there's like 1,000 members total. And we should definitely build feeds from that. So we have a member feed. Right. But like that's actually super approachable. And 1,000 people is actually quite a lot of people.
Right. That's already traction. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the other side of it, of if your idea needs you to run your own version of the entire fire hose, it's like, oh shit, yeah, that's real money. And so that's us all working together and being like, great, I would just like to have all of the posts that say Sebastian in it. And I would like that to not cost $1,000. And that's where we can pool resources, I think. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I sort of related, but in a different direction. I think one of the things that is a little bit tricky about jumping into the atmosphere and like getting into development here is that you have all of these like components and modules that work pretty well on their own and have very like explicit and intentional purpose. But in order to do anything substantial, right, you have to mix and match them all. If you have a labeler but don't have intake and processing, right, like in this case a chatbot, then the barrier to use it effectively and efficiently is increased substantially. If you have a feed that has any sort of personalization or customization, but you don't have an OAuth app that allows them to log in and configure their stuff, then your feed is going to be limited to how complex and how expansive it can be. And then, of course, if you have any sort of like identity management or any sort of like event-driven functionality or processing, you have to be you have to subscribe to Jetstream or the Firehose, hopefully Jetstream, to actually like make it functional and to do stuff. So I think the difficulty is like how do we help developers and how do we help each other understand how all of these pieces fit together in sort of the big picture. And it's good that there are more starter apps and example apps out there. They, in my opinion, are a little bit simplistic, and they don't really show how all of these things move together, because when you've seen one app protocol app, you've seen one app protocol app. They're all bespoke. They all do different purposes, and they all mix and match the components differently. So I hear what you're saying. I've personally struggled with that because the learning curve to also like understand all this stuff is complicated. Like I'm only starting now to get into labelers, and Smoke Signal's been running for nearly 6 months now, you know?
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So I'll just throw on there because I've had you mentioned building a development industry like overarching labeler. I don't know if any of them have actually done it, but I've had 3 people reach out to me about that specific thing and be like, hey, how did you build it so I can build it? Do you have your stuff open source? And I'm like, yeah, I do. It's not going to be super helpful for you, but yeah, I do. Go through the hosting, set up Ozone and start from scratch and recognize that it won't scale if you get a lot of traction, right? So very similar to what Boris was saying is like, very likely if you kick this off, if you don't have a huge following out of the gate, like I've been building up that game dev community for a year on Blue Sky, and I've gotten a lot of traction within that specific community. So when I built the labeler and I put it out, everybody was like, oh, hey, cool, we'll use this. But if you're not already getting a lot of traction on stuff like that, then your initial influx is probably going to be pretty small, like Boris was saying. But I think the biggest thing is that when the second and third person about those reached out to me, I also connected them to the first person to be like, hey, look, if you do get traction, it's going to be big. And there's going to be a lot of people, I can tell you, because I'm dealing with it right now. So like go work together, right? I pulled in a couple of extra people who had offered to help early on when I was doing the manual labeling to be able to stay on top of stuff. And it was like, okay, I'm going to distribute some responsibilities to this guy and some to this guy. And then I'll take on like the biggest, most time consuming parts. But like, it was definitely about building a team and not just doing it all myself. Right. So, I mean, we're working on distributed, decentralized stuff. We have so many people that are probably interested in building the exact same thing. So find those people and work with them if it's intimidating,
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, for sure.
Yeah.
Should I chime in?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So my question, you mentioned, Trezy, earlier in your talk that the game devs were leaving Twitter because of the AI terms of service changes. And it actually just raised a question I'd never contemplated with Blue Sky, which is what is the landscape of how do they even think about terms of service when they're using App Proto? And are they more protected or less protected by coming to App Proto and putting all their content on there?
Yeah, so that was a pretty big concern early on because when people found out that Blue Sky was using Hive for moderation stuff, there was a huge backlash about it. A lot of people being like, "Hey, there is AI. They're already scraping all of our stuff. It's getting sold. We can see the TOS for Blue Sky, but we can't see it for Hive. We don't know what's happening there, right?" And so the Blue Sky team did come back and they're like, this is the agreement we have. Nothing's being shared. Whatever. We're using it solely for the moderation. Your data's not being sold. We're not scraping to build LLMs or anything. So that was a helpful start. And then just recently, the Blue Sky team released they put out a Skeet a Skeet thread, and they I'll never stop. I just want to point out, I'll never stop calling them Skeets.
Yeah, same.
So they put out a thread saying this is our stance on AI, right? We have no intention of scraping content on Blue Sky for AI to build LLMs or to sell data or anything along those lines. We are intending to monetize through other ways. And that was where they sort of talked about the subscription models, sort of Discord Nitro style subscription models and things like that, paywalls for longer video uploads and such. But they put out a pretty clear statement saying that they don't want AI to be a significant part of their platform. I think another big thing is like the general sentiment across the community on Blue Sky already is pretty anti-AI. Not entirely, right? There's plenty of people that are still using it, plenty of people that are talking about it. But like generally, at least anecdotally, right, from the content that I've seen there are a lot of people that are opposed to it. They probably don't know that there are feeds running that are passing their data right into OpenAI already, but generally, Blue Sky itself is not purporting that they're going to take your content and run it through LLMs and sell your data. So realistically, I think from all of that information, I don't know that devs are really any more or less protected on Blue Sky than they were on Twitter. I think they are protected from Grok because Grok's not on Blue Sky. But I think beyond that, like it's an open protocol. All of your information is public. Everything can be retrieved, parsed, and passed into whatever system they want, right? By third parties, and it is being handled that way right now. So,
you're posting on the internet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of why I asked the question. I can understand the sentiment to leave because you see that they're explicitly saying, "Hey, we're going to scrape your stuff." Going somewhere thinking, "Oh, well, these people won't scrape my stuff," but you're going to a protocol where it's going to be easier for everybody to scrape your stuff. And so I'm just curious, like, how are people like thinking about this problem and dealing with it?
Let's
Might be a future talk.
And say Trezy, thank you to Trezy. So once again, thank you. That was amazing of the whole run through. Super useful for me. Lots of new info. Thank you very much. Round of applause. And we will see you on the internet, and I'll stop the recording now.